quintessential British period drama.
Yeah. No, I've heard good things about it, but
it's good.
I've never watched it.
It's addictive. If you sit and watch like first episode with her, you're done.
Yeah,
you'll get hooked. I didn't expect to love it, and I watched like one episode, and I was like, "What is going on? I have to watch this." I watched it all.
All right, with that, we are live. Actually, on time, I think, this week for episode 65 of Trek Live.
Yeah.
Creepiest moments of Star Trek. It's gonna get creepy and a little eerie, so it should be fun.
Yeah. Looking forward to talking about these. Some of these are really like nostalgic for me, like things that really creeped me out when I was a kid and still kind of do. And some of them are more recent things that, give me the creeps. But I'm definitely really eager to hear what you have to say. I don't know what you picked. I have maybe some ideas, but we didn't talk about our lists. You kind of know what I have because I sent you screenshots, but I have no idea what you have. So I'm really interested to see what you have to share. And if anybody's in the audience, anybody's watching, we definitely want to hear from you. Like, what are your Star Trek creepiest Star Trek moments? Same kind of thing. Like, if there are things that really freaked you out when you were a kid, I'm definitely interested to hear if you're a longtime fan and were a fan when you were a kid. If there are things that you remember being scared of, because there are a couple of mine for sure. Before we get going with our topic, what have you watched lately? I know you watched one episode that you tweeted about. Drumhead.
Drumhead. So that was the last episode I saw or I watched.
Okay.
I watched Cupid.
Cupid's a fun one.
Yeah, I don't know what we talked about last week.
I don't think we did like a rewatch roundup last week. I think the last one that I remember you kind of talking about was Night Terrors.
Yeah, and that's kind of what kind of inspired this topic of the show.
Yeah, you definitely were on a little bit of a run there where you had a couple of episodes with some horror elements or some creepy stuff kind of going on with Night Terrors and Identity Crisis, and there was some stuff in the Nth Degree that freaked me out when I was a kid. Some images, some shots.
Yep.
So I'm not surprised. I mean, we're definitely doing this, because of the month we're in. It's October, it's Halloween season, so it all makes sense. But I think the gears started churning when you maybe hit some of those episodes.
Yep.
So, like always, we're kind of always, or on occasion, we do episodes that are kind of inspired by where we are in our rewatches and things that are, hitting us as we're going through what we're watching. This episode's no exception. So, what did you think of the Drumhead?
I loved it. I thought it was a great episode. I think it kind of snuck up on me. Going into it, I was like, I didn't really remember the episode all that much, and I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, that's a classic. As you saw, like with a lot of the replies that we got when we were kind of talking about it on Twitter. It's really well respected. It is it's a very serious episode. It's very topical. It's got a lot of big things to say. I love what it says about so sometimes the villains of the world are not mustache twirling, like obvious people that are out to do harm, like for harm's sake. It's people who may have good intentions and may think they're doing the right thing, but are going down the wrong road, per se. I love that guest performance. I love the way that Worf kind of gets sucked into it a little bit. I love the way Michael Dorn kind of plays his part in that. His sort of distrust for the Romulans and his kind of aggressive tendencies anyway. His instincts lead him to following her maybe more quickly and more easily than most. I love that whole dynamic. And of course, Patrick Stewart is at his best in that. He gets
great performance, so powerful.
Yeah. Yep. It's exactly what he's best at. He gets to give speeches and monologues and be profound and have the moral high ground. and that's the kind of stuff that Patrick Stewart, I think, kills the most. You know, that's some of his best stuff in TNG. That's an episode that really gives him that opportunity. So I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad that you tweeted about it, and you got to see that that's a favorite for a lot of people, and it's upper echelon TNG for sure. Yeah.
Yes. Where are you in your rewatch?
Still nowhere with. I'm after season 1 of TNG. I finished that a couple weeks ago. I haven't started season 2 yet. I think that's going to be next weekend. Got a couple things going on this weekend, and I like to take a little bit of a break in between each season, let each season breathe a little bit. So I'm thinking next Friday night I will kick season 2 off with a mock time.
Nice. And
a lot of other classic episodes right at the beginning of season 2. I'm really excited because it's got, like, in those first 6 episodes, it's a mock time, it's the Doomsday Machine, it's Mirror Mirror. There's a lot of really big classics, you know, staple episodes of TOS right at the beginning of season 2. So that's always a fun part of the show. Yep. All right, so I guess we're just going to kind of dive into this. We're going to talk about our most memorably creepy scenes in Star Trek history. We're going to do it kind of like we did with our best shots episode a couple of weeks ago. We're actually going to put shots on the screen, just so there's a little bit of visual aid for people, I guess, who are watching us live or recorded. So we're going to start off, I think, with, let's see, a shot from an Enterprise episode.
Yes.
And this is one that I picked. This is the teaser from Impulse, the Vulcan zombie episode, which I also picked a shot from the last time we did an episode like this. So I guess that's a memorable episode for me. The teaser for Impulse is really kind of unusual. It's like 30 seconds long. It's T'Pol being dragged into sickbay by Archer and thrown on a bio bed, and she's going crazy. She's screaming at the top of her lungs. The cinematography is really like crazy handheld stuff. Like, it's claustrophobic. It's like extreme close-ups, and she's like screaming right into the camera, which is unusual for T'Pol to be like screaming at the top of her lungs. You have no context for anything. Like, it just jumps right into sickbay, and she's getting dragged in screaming. So it's a really effective teaser for all those reasons. You know, if you're dragging Trip or Malcolm or somebody like that and they're screaming, it's like, they just got injured, something bad happened, and that's unusual and too. But to have like the Vulcan character, the stoic, unemotional Vulcan, screaming at the top of their lungs, looking not good, with Archer all bloodied, it's like, what the hell is happening? What's going to happen in this episode? So that's always really stood out to me as like a whoa moment. I remember watching it when it aired, and it made an impression, and it never fails to, like, set me back a little, give me a little goosebumps when I hit that episode. Is that something you remember from that episode?
I just remember the cinematography. It's just really in your face, kind of just like how T'Pol is in that scene. I remember being freaked out. Like right away. So yeah, it's definitely a creepy scene.
Yeah, definitely. It's memorable. When Star Trek does, there are a handful of like really short burst teasers in Star Trek history. They're not too frequent. Things like Scorpion, where it's really short and to the point, and Impulse is kind of in that family, and they always make a kind of a strong impression when they go down that route. It's not just like a 2-minute scene that sets up the episode. It's like something that's meant to like grab your attention and be quick. Not overstay its welcome. And Impulse is definitely an example of that kind of teaser.
Yeah.
I think that's it for that one. What's up next?
So up next is one of my picks. It's it's a shot from Impact from DS9. I remember I picked it was tough to find a shot. I picked kind of cheated this episode because as I still am kind of afraid of the dark, and this to me was just such a skin crawling, creepy episode. I know this kind of style episode theme, abandoned ship, has been done before, but This to me was just uber creepy, especially with you know Kardashian, you know architecture and all that
Yeah.
shit. It was awesome. So
That's a great pick. As just if we're talking just like pure horror episodes, Impact Noir I think would have to be in that conversation because it's like consistently kind of unsettling and scary, and it definitely ramps up as it goes. Like by 15 minutes into it, it's pretty intense from that point on to the end. And I think that's a really good point that the Cardassian architecture, like that set design in the dark. If you really notice, like you really look at the sets on Deep Space Nine, there's a lot of stuff sticking out of the wall, like places to hide. There's a lot of unusual stuff happening with the design of the rooms and the hallways. Like it's tailor made for like a haunted house kind of thing. And it's unusual to see Deep Space Nine so dark, like this dark, or Impact Noir in this case. And it's really well suited for anything to be kind of lingering around a corner. Yeah, I think that's another one that like the cinematography and the set design and stuff like that really kind of aids the whole package and makes it as scary as it is. Yeah. So that's a good pick. It's definitely one of the highlight Star Trek horror outings.
Yeah, and I think that there's other episodes after it that kind of try to do the same thing, which I still love. But to me, this was like the ultimate kind of creepy, abandoned, dark episode.
Yeah, I think it's the most effective one in that family. I think it's the one that is the most consistently maintains that real sense of horror.
Yeah,
and it's not just kind of a paint by numbers. We're on a stranded ship. It's legitimately kind of scary for an extended period of time. I think what you said about the architecture is really a really good point.
Yeah. So up next is one of
this one is one of the freaked me out, scared the living daylights out of me as a kid kind of choices. I did an episode of Trek Ranks about a year ago, actually, and we talked about like gory moments, and I picked this, and it's not really gory in terms of what you can actually see, but I was kind of twisting it and letting my mind kind of, or asking everybody to go with me and let your mind kind of do the work and imagine what's happening right under that bulkhead or under the floor. This shot of a crewman who, for the ship in this episode, in theory, from Next Generation, hits an anomaly and it's causing all kinds of structural problems on the ship. People are, people are falling through bulkheads and stuff. And, I don't know how else to describe it. Like glasses, things are, liquids coming through glasses. Like it's just screwing around with the physics of everything. And this is a shot that I remember as like a 4-year-old walking into the living room and seeing this and literally screaming and running out of the room. It was like the scariest thing I'd ever seen for whatever reason at that time. It's the look on her face. It's the bizarre effect is kind of weird and unexpected. And it still kind of gives me the creeps every time I see it. And I'll always remember the reaction when I was 4 years old of it scaring the living daylights out of me. So I couldn't possibly, anytime I do anything horror related for Star Trek, if I'm like counting down, this is not by any means like a horror episode. It's actually a romantic comedy about Data learning to date. And this is just like the B plot. But this image is, if I don't include it in anything, any kind of list that's about like what scares me in Star Trek, I'm lying, because it's like the quintessential scare the daylights out of me as a kid Star Trek moment. Am I alone? Is this something that
it's definitely creepy. It's not something that I thought of right away, but it is creepy to think that there's always that chance, especially like using the transporter, you could materialize in a rock or a bulkhead or a shuttlecraft or something like that. So yeah, no, it's scary. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's such like an innocuous thing. It's somebody, obviously this crewman was just like, she got out of the turbo lift and was walking down the hallway, and that was it.
Yeah.
Like she fell through she unexpectedly fell through the floor and died a horrible death. I mean, you can see, like, I think that's what does it for me. It's the look on her face, like just like going through daily life, just doing her thing, and it's over just like that. If memory serves, like Jordy and a couple of crewmen are like walking around or something, and they hear her scream, and they go running, and that's what they find. So I think the scream in the scene also really does it for me too. It's not like they're just like rounding a corner and they walk into that. Like they hear it happen, and that definitely also made an impression on me as a kid. Like hearing the scream, and then that's what you find. It's just like finding somebody who's just like laying on the ground, something bad happened is one thing, but half their body sticking out of the floor. It's just such a weird, bizarre thing that you don't see every day.
Yeah.
So, and Grin Salem says that it is a creepy shot. So I'm definitely not alone. Got some agreements there, and seem to agree too. So, and I get it that it doesn't really stand out because it's not, unlike a lot of these other choices have that are coming from episodes that definitely have a horror sort of
vibe to them already. Yeah.
Exactly. Like Epoch Noir and Impulse, and they're episodes that maybe when you start thinking about like, okay, what's scary in Star Trek, those episodes are the kind of episodes that come to mind. This is not a horror episode by any means. Like I said, it's a rom-com with a little bit of Star Trek science fiction craziness going on in the B plot, and have this one little moment of horror that has never escaped me. So had to pick it.
Yeah. Great pick.
Thanks.
My next pick is Voyager episode The Thaw.
Okay.
This episode still kind of scares me. I don't know what it is. It's just the unsettled. It just makes me a little bit unsettled when I watch this. Yeah. It's a great episode to me. It's, in my book, one of Star Trek's creepiest. I know it's kind of subjective, but it's creepiest moments. So that's why I chose it.
It is creepy. There are decapitations that happen in this episode.
Yep.
This is another one that I think I actually picked for the most gory moments on Trek Ranks when I did it. For that reason, you don't see the decapitation, but you know it's happening.
Yep.
It's not something you have happen very often in Star Trek. Somebody gets guillotined, and Harry Kim just about does too. And no, I mean, if you're the type of person, I guess when I was a kid, I was a little afraid of clowns. But if you had any of that in your background, if you were afraid of clowns, or if you are afraid of clowns, the Thaw is going to be horrifying to you because he's got that look to him, and he is he's freaky. That actor really, does everything he can to make that character memorably unsettling. And The Thaw is an episode that is one of the more divisive outings in I think Star Trek history, and Voyager's got a couple of these. I hear what you're saying. You're a fan of The Thaw, and I know people who really love The Thaw, and I know people who hate The Thaw. And I don't know why that is. I don't know what makes it so divisive. So that's something or at some point on Trek Live, maybe look at some of these episodes that are like cut them right down the middle, and you have people who love them on one side and hate them on the other. But this is definitely a good pick. There are some really scary things that happen in The Thaw when the guy does get guillotined, and when Harry Kim in this scene almost gets it too. The tension's really, really, through the roof. The extras are going crazy. Like there's a lot of noise. It's loud. And the actors do a really good job of selling that they're afraid, and that's what this episode's like ultimately about. It's like fear, overcoming people, and that's what ultimately kills them. It's not really the guillotine in this virtual world. It's people literally like scaring themselves to death, and the actors do a really good job selling that, and that's what makes it scary to me. Like it's not so much like the the guillotine that you're not actually going to see. It's seeing Harry Kim scared out of his mind. And the actor who plays the guy who gets guillotined, who actually gets killed, really, really does a good job playing that scene. You can see him like kind of going into shock as it's happening. He really sells that plot point of literally scaring yourself to death. So definitely a good pick. I'm not surprised that Voyager got some love. And I'm
Had
not
to
sure.
find some way to get a Voyager episode on here.
Yeah, and this is a great one. This is a great one to have on for creepy, scary kinds of topics.
Yep. I liked it because it doesn't feel like a typical, scary. It's not really dark. There's not a lot of blood. There's not a lot of gore or anything like that. It's a little bit different, and that's why I kind of chose it, because I was surprised that I was so scared. So,
yeah, it's definitely, that's a really good point too. It's colorful. It's like lively. It's on the surface, people are like happy, and in like the extras and all, people are like enjoying it, which is scary. Like that's another thing about it that's like unsettling, is people are like cheering you on and excited about it.
Yeah,
which is weird and unsettling. But it's unlike like Empire Noir and Impulse and some of these other picks. It's not dark and like boo kind of scary. It's like I said, it's the actors selling it and the situation more than the wallpaper of it. The lighting and jump scare kind of stuff. Cool. So the next one for me is brand new Star Trek. It's from Star Trek Discovery, and it's from the episode "Context is for Kings," and it's the scene on the Glen when they're investigating, trying to figure out what happened. They know the crew is dead, and they come across these mangled bodies that they're trying to figure out, if it's related to like a malfunction in the spore drive, if it's something that the spore drive is responsible for, or if it's something else. And this scene ultimately leads to them discovering the tardigrade, and it's got like an alien kind of vibe, where they're getting chased down corridors, trying to escape this creature that they have no idea, what's going on with. But I remember this specific shot really kind of freaking me out. Star Trek kind of going down the gory. Chris Salem says she can't even look at the picture.
Yeah.
We won't leave it up for long. We'll move on quickly, because it is creepy and it's disgusting. But it's an unusual gory thing in Star Trek, where they really didn't shy away from some blood and gore and gross out kind of stuff. But it's beyond that too. I mean, that's just a little burst in that whole sequence. It's got a lot of traditional stuff going on too. Walking down a dark corridor with sparks going off, and weird noises in the distance, and not knowing what's right ahead. They come across dead Klingons, and like, what could do this to a bunch of Klingons? And the Klingons are mangled like this too, and it turns out it's the tardigrade like ripping these guys to shreds. So yeah, definitely scary in a new kind of way. I can't claim that this freaked me out as a kid, because it didn't arrive yet. It's brand new. It freaked me out as an adult, which is kind of unique to some of these choices.
Yep.
What about you? Is this something that you remember?
I remember super freaky, two things. Another empty ship, looking around, darkness. And then two, they, like you said it before, Star Trek doesn't use blood a lot. So when they do, it's just like, it's creepy. And yeah, this is definitely a good pick for a creepy shot. I will refrain from keeping it up any longer. I think yes. So this shot is the one that originally kind of stemmed the inspiration for this episode. It's Night Terrors, and I was afraid in this shot. It was creepy, and it was later at night. Everyone went to bed. It was just me watching Star Trek, and this shot to me, it just creeped me out. It creeped me out when I watched it, just a few episodes ago. So I had to have it on my list.
Yeah, this is definitely, I think, that's the most traditionally effectively scary moment in that episode. And that episode's got some some freaky imagery in it. You know, when I think of Night Terrors, I think of this. I think of this scene with Crusher, and I think of Worf in his quarters with the knife, and I think of Riker finding snakes in his bed, things like that. That Night Terror's got a lot of creepy imagery, but this is the one that really does stand out in my head, because it's so traditional and it's so like. I don't know. It's simple, but it's scary. Like I don't know what else to say. It's effective in every way. Gates McFadden's awesome in that scene, playing it up and milking the audience. And it's
to me, it's just the whole episode was just really eerie and this shot to me just I don't know embodies that.
It does embody that. Yeah, it's the most effective attempt at horror in that episode. And there's some other good ones too. I can't claim to love the episode as a whole. I think it good.
Agreed. Did we lose Bill? Oh, you're back. You're back.
I'm back.
Yep.
Okay, cool. I'm saying I can't claim to love that episode as a whole. There are things about it that I'm not a fan of, but shots like that, little sequences like that, and some of the other nightmare moments really are pretty effective. But I think I agree with you that that's the when I think of Night Terrors, that's the scene that I think of.
Yeah, so moving on to Bill's pick. It's more blood.
This is going to be from Star Trek VI.
Yes.
This is another one that I have to go back to my childhood a little bit. This is the first movie that I ever saw in a movie theater, Star Trek VI. And floating bubbles of blood, pink blood, were scary to 6-year-old me. But this is one that I think I have to credit. The reason that it's still a little creepy to me is going to come down to the some of the production elements, like the score. The score in that sequence is there's a lot of gravity to it. It's tense. I wouldn't say that it's like a traditional horror score. But it's heavily dramatic, and the way that it's shot, kind of putting you in the perspective of the assassins walking around and blowing people away, is effectively creepy. But as a kid, all those things definitely combined to make it scary for 6-year-old me. But it was the actors seemingly in zero gravity and floating and helplessly being shot, with the blood bubbles being something, again, like as a 6-year-old, it's unexpected and something you've never seen before, and just that makes it even more creepy that it's not consistent with some of the other things. Like, I was 6, I was young, but I had seen a lot of Star Trek, so it wasn't the first time that I had seen people get shot with a phaser. Like, that's not an unusual image for people who watch Star Trek as a kid. But this definitely ramped it up a little bit with zero gravity and people clearly dying when they're hit, and not just kind of like vaporized away. It's like there's an impact to these phaser hits. People's arms get blown off, and it's some of the effects don't hold up super well 30 years later. It's still good. I think it does hold up pretty well, but it's not state of the art anymore by any means. And the pink blood is definitely kind of silly in a lot of people's minds now. I guess the famous story was they had to do that to keep it PG. Star Trek movies tended to be PG up until First Contact, and I don't even know if PG-13 existed in 1991. I think it probably did, but to keep it PG, they needed to not have gallons of red blood floating around everywhere in a scene like this. So blood was pink for Klingons. It does look like paintball, Great Salem. So is this a memorable scene for you from Star Trek 6? Something that comes to mind is something creepy for you? Like, what do you think?
It doesn't like it didn't come to mind something creepy. It did like almost like a
Yeah.
like kind of grossed out, like um I don't know, a little bit gruesome. Not super creepy, but it was just like a moment, you know.
Yeah.
So
I get that.
It's a great pick, though.
Thanks, appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's like I said, it's one that childhood definitely plays a big part. I remember sitting on my dad's lap, like being afraid in the movie theater during that scene. So another one that I'm not gonna ever probably forget. It made a lasting impression.
Yep.
In that way.
Yeah. So my next pick is another TNG pick. I guess it's kind of influencing me because I'm going through TNG right now. But Conspiracy, when he's eating the worms, oh man, that was just creepy, cringeworthy, gross, all the above. It was even looking at the picture, it's just like
it's
nasty.
It is.
Yep.
Couldn't agree more. It is another one. I didn't pick it, but as a kid, it's another big impression on me. And seeing those guys eating those worms is like, it's bizarre and it's creepy. And that's another one that's an episode with a great score. There's some really good like tense horror-esque kind of music in that scene that really kind of play up that what the heck is happening element to that whole sequence. And that imagery is so bizarre that it doesn't really need that scary music to make it scary, but it helps. Like it definitely ramps it up a little bit. But that's a great scene in a really, really good early TNG episode. And I'm embarrassed that I didn't pick it because it's such a classic creepy Star Trek moment.
Yep.
And that episode's got a couple of them.
It does. Especially the thing in the back of their neck and just
Yep, Remek's head being blown off with when the mother thing comes out of his chest. Like that's Conspiracy's pretty ahead of its time as far as like the graphic violence of Star Trek. It really stands out in that time, early TNG. Early TNG didn't go that way very often. Star Trek as a whole really didn't go that way very often up until Discovery, with like what we were talking about with Context is for Kings, with like the blood and gore kind of stuff. Conspiracy is kind of the one example from that era where they really kind of pushed that envelope.
Yeah.
But great scene and a great episode.
Yes. Yep. Next up is another pick from Bill.
Yep. This is from Star Trek: The Motion Picture. It's a scene that I think is actually with each time I've seen it. It is the transporter accident at the beginning of the motion picture, and this is one that it's not what you really see. All you see is a transporter effect, kind of struggling to bring people in. Like it's not gory. It's not violent really. But what really stands out to me is the sound effects. It's the kind of like blood curdling screams coming from the transporter buffer. People apparently dying a really, really horrible death while they're in the process of transporting. And it's somewhat the visual effect. Look really closely, kind of see, sort of images of people kind of struggling and kind of moving around a little bit. But it's very, I don't know what the word is, I think, but it's very, I don't know. I'm struggling. It's not in your face. The motion picture's rated G, so there's nothing particularly violent about it, and there's nothing particularly graphic about it. But it's subtle, I guess, is the way to put it. It's there if you're really thinking about it. It makes your mind do the work for you. It shows you just enough to kind of give you a little bit of an impression of what's happening to these guys. I think it's really effective in that way. It gives you just enough to let your mind kind of fill in the gap and you can kind of create your own picture. And I don't think anybody's picture of that is going to be pretty.
Yes.
What gets, they don't materialize on the Enterprise. I guess, materialize back where they're transporting from, and they get that, message. They're talking to the starbase, Earth, I guess, because they're still on dry dock. While this is happening, trying to work together to save these two guys, and on Earth, after this is all done, they say what came back didn't live long, fortunately. So on that transporter pad on Earth, there was something that wasn't too pretty that came out of this. So yeah, definitely creepy for me. And like I said, I saw the motion picture many, many times as a kid, and I can't claim that I don't remember this scaring me as a kid, but as I've gotten older and I see this movie, coming from a more mature place and adulthood, this unsettles me more than it has in the past.
Yeah.
And I think it's really good filmmaking because of how minimal it is.
Yeah.
Simple it is. Yeah. What do you think? We just kind of rewatched? Didn't we watch the motion picture not so long ago?
No, I think it's a great pick. I think that it, like you said, it has a great balance of like a good visual effects element where you can see if you really look closely their bodies churning and stuff, and then the sound design also makes it for me. So I think that perfect balance allows your imagination to take over, and just it's not good.
Yeah. No, not good. The sound effect is probably the most effective thing about it for me. The way that scream is pitched coming from the transporter is definitely like I can hear it in my head right now.
Yeah.
It's not a typical scream because it's all distorted from the transporter. It's got a weird effect to it, and it's memorable in that way. So it was a no-brainer for me.
Yeah.
And like I said, more from adult experiences than childhood, unlike some of these.
Yeah. So this next pick, it was Bill's, but we kind of both because I would have picked it too if he didn't. So yeah,
it's probably my number one. I think if I had to pick like one thing that has creeped me out the most over the years in Star Trek, this is going to be it for me.
Yeah. Yeah,
it is the Ceti Alpha eels in the Wrath of Khan, and it's this is just spectacular, awesome filmmaking in this sequence. The build up to it is so effective, and it's all kinds of stuff happening at once. So it's the way the scene is written, like the dialogue itself, like as Khan is explaining like what's going to happen, but it's Montalban's performance as well. He does this thing with like the tweezers, like he puts it up to his ear and he's like talking about like he does such a good job of like unsettling the audience, talking about it and like explaining what's going to happen to these guys. And then it's a slow build up too, like it's not sudden. He's literally explaining everything that's going to happen, what he's going to do. It's the performance of Walter Koenig and Paul Winfield in this moment, like when it's on their face, right before it happens. It's their screams, it's the score, the way the score builds up to it. It's the silence right after they scream. It's just really well done, and this is one that I wouldn't watch Star Trek 2 as a kid for a while because of this scene. Like I think I must have like tried to watch it as a young kid and got to the scene and I was like, nope, I didn't. I think I was probably 8 or 9 before I even saw the movie in full, and it was probably the last thing up to that point that I hadn't seen in full up to that point. And it was because of this scene, because this scared the hell out of me. But what about you?
This is probably my number one too. It's it's everything. It's gruesome. It's creepy. It's unsettling. It makes your skin crawl. It's scary.
It is. I think it's one of those things that I think has really stood the test of time. I know, like I've shown Star Trek 2 to a friend of mine, and I remember this scene coming on, and he's a pretty tough guy. Like he's not somebody that's like easily like freaked out. But I remember looking at his face while the scene was playing, and he was like like taken aback by it. It definitely was unsettling even for him, as somebody who's not real invested in Trek or prone to being scared or freaked out by TV or movies.
Yeah.
So I think that speaks to it, the effectiveness of it. And yeah, I'm comfortable saying it's my number one. Like if we had to do like pick your one like scariest, freakiest moment in Star Trek history, creepiest, this is going to be it for me.
Yeah, it's definitely this one.
Yeah, and I think what you said too is true. Kind of everything. It's gruesome, it's gory to some extent, but it's got some of the simple stuff happening too. Like it's not too flashy, it's not too like over the top, you know. Like it's very simple, but it finds that like happy medium where it kind of will touch everybody. Like whatever tends to scare people, it's gonna have
checks all the boxes
of it. Yeah, it really kind of does. Yeah. It's pretty undeniably creepy, I think. And I'd be surprised. I think if we put a poll out there for like what moment is the creepiest, I think this is one that would get a lot of picks, a lot of citations. Yeah. So I think that's it as far as like our actual picks that we pulled screenshots for, and wanted to formally talk about. But question for you is just like a more general thing, like which Star Trek show do you think does the best job with like horror, creepy kind of stuff? Like when you think of this sort of thing, like which show do you think comes to mind the most often, I guess?
To me, it's tough to say because it might be the movies. Because even like there's creepy moments in, the Kelvin timeline moments. Marcus is breaking the leg. Pike getting an eel force fed down him. On the ice planet. I think, to me, the more scary moments do happen in, I guess, the films. So.
Yeah, I think I would say I would agree with that. I think the movies, by their nature, being bigger and maybe a little more apt to take chances with things like this. Stakes are higher in the movies. They tend to be. A lot of the picks are kind of easy to pull from movies. Grant Salem's asking about Sub Rosa. I thought about it. I almost sent Dan a very suggestive and borderline inappropriate screenshot, but I didn't do it. That fits in a different category.
Yeah.
I don't know what that category is. But there's a category out there for Sub Rosa that we'll touch on at some point. But I know what you're talking about, and it is creepy.
Yeah.
But TNG is probably the show. If I had to pick something outside of the movies, I think TNG actually has a good bit of creepy stuff in it. Conspiracy, Night Terrors, Identity Crisis has some creepy stuff in it.
Yeah.
Sub Rosa has what it tries to do. The Q Who with the introduction of the Borg. That's got some creepy stuff in it. I think they played with horror a good bit there, and I think Voyager does too a little bit. Brandon Braga. Yep. Haunting on Deck 12 has some cool stuff in it that is like playing with the horror genre, like classic horror tropes. One thing that I almost picked, it's not creepy in any kind of like traditional horror way, is I always think of Deadlock. Like when the Vidians are on the ship and mowing people down and pulling organs out of casts, like that's an unsettling, like really kind of scary sequence. It's not horror really, so I kind of stayed away from it here. I tended to go more like, traditionally scary kind of stuff. But Deadlock has some horror elements to it in that back half. Scorpion's got that really cool image of the dead Borg bodies piled up. That's some creepy stuff. Grand Salem saying vaulting ambition from Discovery. That's actually a pretty good pick. There's some really dark stuff in that episode.
Yep.
Giorgio throwing the disc and cutting people's heads off in bulk.
Yep.
Yeah, the mirror universe with that's the one where they're eating Kelpian. Like that's some creepy crawly, disgusting stuff. So that's a good call, Grand Salem. That's a good pick. So maybe Discovery will end up being the one.
Yeah, the creepiest.
Yeah, where they because of the nature of its their ability to play with gore and blood. Yes Man 1701 says Genesis, the TNG episode from season 7. There's a lot of horror stuff in that. That's a good pick.
Scientific method from Voyager.
Yeah, that's got some creepy stuff.
Yeah.
Janeway with the needles in her head. Yeah, that's a memorable image.
Yeah.
Waking Moments has some creepy stuff in it with the dream sequences, the alien face. So I'd say right now it's TNG Voyager, and I think probably due to Brandon Braga mostly because he's such a horror guy. Horror is like his big influence. Enterprise less so. He's got a big hand in Enterprise, but I don't know that they went as heavy into the horror. Yeah, welcome, Yes Man.
Yeah, welcome. Good to have you here.
Yeah. Good to see you. But yeah, I think TNG and Voyager both have a lot of good picks that we didn't quite hit on. But if you go through those shows, I think horror's got a pretty big presence in their repertoire.
Yeah. What's the episode with Seven and the Doctor just alone on the ship? Another alone on the ship.
One.
Yeah, one. Yep.
Yeah, that's got some horror stuff in it. Species 847 too.
Yep.
And Yes Man from Scorpion's got some cool horror elements in it. Between that and just some of the more traditional Borg stuff is pretty scary in it. Another thing that I did not pick, there are a couple different versions of this, but the one that I think maybe comes most to mind is there's a montage in first of people being assimilated. That's pretty creepy. And then there's a sequence in Dark Frontier in Voyager where there's like 7 of 9s in an assimilation chamber when they're trying to wipe out like an entire species. And that's one that I talked about in the Gory Moments episode of Trek Ranks, where to me, like the sound effects of like hearing people being assimilated kind of all around you, and kind of that sequence does a really good job of like putting you in that place, making you feel like you're in that room, surrounded by all those horrible things happening to people. So anytime the Borg are assimilating, that shot in First Contact, the first time you really ever see like the tubules going into somebody's neck, and seeing him change slowly. Yeah. That's creepy. And that's another one, like as a kid, that made a big impression on me as like a wow, that's freaky.
Yeah.
So First Contact is another one that's got a lot of picks. The woman engineer who like crawls up into the Jeffries tube and gets grabbed. That's really good direction by Frakes, and some cool like homages to things like Alien. So yeah, I'm kind of embarrassed I didn't pick anything from First Contact, because there's like quite a few different little things
moments.
We could have grabbed.
Yeah.
But yeah, like all these Star Trek topics, there's no end to the choices. We could be here all day and just put up shot after shot.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. Even going back all the way, there's actually some creepy stuff in the, believe it or not.
It is, yeah.
Some of the stuff that is happening to Pike is pretty unsettling in that that I actually remember like being afraid of as a kid. Like the scene where he's trying to strangle the Telosian, and the Telosian like changes into like this big monster thing. Like as a kid, it's kind of creepy. It's scary. So it started early for Star Trek, kind of playing with horror elements. And I'm sure that was kind of like the Twilight Zone being like the biggest show on TV, I guess, in that time. I'm sure Star Trek was like the original series was obviously influenced a lot by the Twilight Zone, which obviously also played with a lot of horror tropes.
Mm-hmm.
Created a lot of horror tropes, really,
Yeah.
I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think all of the shows have moments. I think we picked something from pretty much every show. We didn't pick anything from TOS proper, but there were movies, quite a few.
Yeah.
And we had Motion Picture, Wrath of Khan, Country,
Yeah.
all represented. But we had some Discovery, we had Enterprise, we had DS9, Voyager, TNG.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show that I think, like I always kind of say, Star Trek's a Swiss Army knife genre. I think we could almost do any genre. Like this was kind of horror centric, but you know, we could do like rom-com moments. You could do almost anything, and you're going to find little bits of stuff from all the shows. The Horta is another cool pick from early in The Devil in the Dark, when you don't know what it is, and it's just killing people, seemingly indiscriminately, and just being a danger. That's actually a really good pick. That's the beauty of that episode, is it tricks you into thinking it's going to be like a horror, go kill the monster kind of thing, but it is very much not until you find out she's cool. Yep. Yep. So I think that's going to about wrap it up as far as our topic goes. I think we covered a lot of stuff. We had 10 formal choices, and I think we just touched on probably at least 10 more, like honorable mention kind of picks. But like we always do, my last question to you is going to be Star content, other podcasts, other anything out there that you've listened to? Or...
Yeah, so I listened to a Mission Log episode. They were talking to Doug Drexler. Anytime Doug Drexler is connected to anything, any podcast, any video, you have to watch it.
Listen.
Because he might be my favorite, behind the scenes personality ever, because he to me is just a fan first, and then he pours his fandom and his love for it into his work, and it's just awesome. So
yeah, that's a cool pick. I have not listened to that yet. There's also a Mission Log that I'm curious to hear with Larry Nemechek, where they're talking about Runaway, the Discovery short. I'm eager to hear that. It's sitting in my queue. There's a new Primitive Culture that I'm eager to listen to. I did listen to a Trek Geeks episode in a couple of weeks. They did one of their theater skippets for Deep Space Nine season 5, and I like those episodes a lot. I like where they kind of go through each episode and give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and just do really quick thoughts on each one and why it's good or not. That was good. They're always quick for me. Like, they're easy for me to just throw on at work, and easy to listen to while I'm doing stuff. But I'm hoping next week I have quite a few to share, because like a pretty good backlog that I'm really eager and excited to listen to. I'll have to throw that Doug Drexler one, make sure I hit that. And, lots of good stuff.
All right, guys, that has been episode 65 of Trek Live. The discussion doesn't have to stop here. Come over to Twitter, Discord channel, Facebook, all that jazz. You guys know the drill. Keep up the Star Trek discussions. We'll be back next week with some more great Star Trek content and discussion.
Hopefully pretty soon we'll have be able to do an episode on the Deep Space Nine documentary, What We Left Behind.
Yes.
It had its premiere last night. It's like formal premiere was last night in Los Angeles, and they're having in Birmingham, United Kingdom next week at their big convention out there. And then I think shortly after that it should be available somehow. I'm not sure. I can't claim to be completely up on like how accessible it's going to be, and if you have to buy the Blu-ray, or if it's going to be available. I don't know. But I will be getting my hands on that pretty quickly after it becomes available, and I'll be eager to talk about it. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to seeing it. I've been looking forward to it for a long time. So we'll definitely be on that when it's available in the hopefully next couple of weeks, few weeks. But thanks to Grin Salem and Yes Man 1701 for being here live with us and
thanks,
sharing some thoughts and giving us some feedback for creepy moments. And anybody who's watching us not live and recorded, thanks for stopping by and checking us out. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. You guys make the show. We'll see you guys next week.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. See ya.